I'm Jonathan Tessier, and we're back here for another episode of Wellness Wisdom with Rebecca. How you doing, Rebecca?
Good morning. I'm good. How are you, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. So today we're going to be talking again about the microbiome, and more specifically our gut microbiome, and all the things that go around with that. And one of the big things with this topic is fiber. So this video is going to be all about fiber. So let's get into it. Like, what is fiber?
What is fiber? Yeah, absolutely. So I think most of us probably know that our fiber is going to come from our whole foods, our fruit and vegetables. So there's two different types of fiber. And fiber, I guess, is just like plant matter, really is kind of what it is. And there's two different types of fiber. You've got your soluble fiber and your insoluble fiber. So your soluble fiber, basically what soluble means is something will dissolve in a solution. It'll dissolve in water. Your insoluble fiber won't do that. It doesn't dissolve in water. So kind of your two different types, but they each do two different things and are both very important kind of to make sure that we're getting enough in our diet. Mm-hmm. So your soluble fiber, chia is kind of a fun example of like soluble versus insoluble fiber. Have you ever made chia pudding or seen a chia pudding made?
I've seen it, yeah.
So you take these little tiny seeds, you put them in water, you let them soak, and it makes a pudding, like nice and soluble. It makes a gel. The interesting thing about chia seeds is they're actually mostly insoluble fiber. So about 90% insoluble, which is the type that doesn't dissolve in water. But even that 10% soluble fiber that's in there makes it that gelatinous kind of consistency when dissolved in water. But chia is a good way, even though it's mostly insoluble fiber, it's a good way to remember what soluble fiber is, like just that kind of gelatinization.
Right.
Yeah. And then your insoluble fiber doesn't dissolve in water, but it acts kind of like a brush in your intestines.
Right.
So think of a lot of your insoluble fiber is coming from almost like the skin of your apple, that kind of thing is where your insoluble fiber is coming from. And because it's not gelatinizing, it, like I said, it's acting as that like broom, kind of sweeping your intestines, keeping them clean, keeping things moving out. And your soluble fiber more so acts like a sponge. Okay. So it's kind of absorbing, so binding to things, grabbing things on the way out. And then that broom is kind of making sure it's working its way out. So you want your insoluble and your soluble fiber. And they're both good for kind of different situations. Right. So your insoluble fiber, the one that doesn't absorb water, is really good for if your bowel movements are kind of slowing down. That kind of might speed things up. Everyone's going to be different in introducing fiber. You're going to react differently than me, than April. But for the most part, if your digestion is too slow, adding an insoluble fiber is a good way to go. So that's like your brands, like your oat bran, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Can help speed things up. Now, if you're finding that your digestion's too quick, you're maybe having too many bowel movements or they're loose, then you would want to add a soluble fiber, kind of gels and absorbs. But there's something that's really important when it comes to adding fiber. As you can imagine, if you're kind of adding in more bulk, you want to make sure you're drinking enough water. So if you're cranking up your fiber and you're not increasing your water, things are just going to get stuck, and nobody wants that.
Yeah. You know? Yeah. True. Okay, so how does something like resistant starch help with all this kind of stuff?
Yeah, great question. So resistant starch is not quite an insoluble fiber and not quite a soluble fiber. So what it's going to do is it's going to be insoluble for most of the way down your intestine. So all the way through your stomach and your small intestine, it's resistant. So it's not easily broken down. So it's going to not break down until it gets to your colon, which is kind of nice. So it's feeding all those gut bugs. Instead of feeding the gut bugs kind of higher up in your digestive tract, it's feeding the gut bugs a little further down and feeding the gut bugs in your colon. And you remember what happens when we introduce a prebiotic, which would be like your fiber, to your probiotics that already exist in your digestive tract?
It makes postbiotics.
It makes postbiotics, yes. Yeah. So fun fact about like a fun postbiotic example is butyrate. We actually now sell it in our supplement section. Okay. So it's a short chain fatty acid. So you've got your prebiotics that feed your probiotics, make your postbiotics. So butyrate is one example. And butyrate's really interesting. It can help kind of repair the gut lining, can really help with kind of mood, all those kinds of things. So it's just kind of a fun, if you give the right ingredients, your body's going to work for you to produce these like really beneficial compounds. And sure, there are times and places where you may need to take it in a supplement form, but unless it's kind of that specific situation, the nice thing is you can go about it by just eating whole foods and still get the benefits of those fun short chain fatty acids.
What is the difference between like dietary fiber and functional fiber?
Yeah, that's a great question. So you can get, of course, you can get fiber in supplemental forms, and then whole foods. So as a nutritionist, my message is always going to be get it from the whole foods first and then supplement on top of that as needed. And there are certainly times and places where that is needed. So there's lots of different kind of options for that. I mean, still in the whole food kind of lane is something like oat bran that could be supplementally added to like your yogurt or your cereal, and that's going to be your insoluble fiber. And then there's something like this Fiber Flow, which is a new product by Organic Traditions. This is mainly this is mainly a soluble fiber that you can add to water, which is great. What is great about products like this is you're consuming it in a drink, so you're making sure you're not missing that water, which is super important, and you're getting that kind of soluble fiber in like a delicious way. So definitely a time and place for those. If you know that's a goal of yours and you know you just have better bowels, then that's an excellent kind of option to add into your day.
So how do stuff like antioxidants and polyphenols come into all this kind of stuff?
That's a really good question. Probably I've talked about antioxidants on almost all of our videos.
Yep.
So antioxidants and polyphenols feed our gut bacteria too. So there's lots of different types of antioxidants, which is really cool. And your gut bugs want to eat all of them, which is like really kind of what the goal of what we're trying to do is get all that diversity of food to our gut bugs so that they can make a diversity of beneficial compounds and bacteria to boost our mood, to keep us healthy, to protect us from infection. So even you're going to find different types of antioxidants in different foods. So definitely the apple is going to be different than the blueberry, than the raspberry. And you want to feed your gut bugs all these different types of foods. We want to eat a diversity of foods so that we're feeding our gut bugs that diversity of foods so that they're then producing the gift back to us of protecting us from infection, lowering our cholesterol, boosting our mood, helping us regulate our blood sugar. Right. So many different benefits. And you want the insoluble fiber, you want the soluble fiber, you want the resistant starch, and you want the antioxidants and polyphenols. And while that sounds maybe a bit complicated, that's like 5 things I've just listed. How am I supposed to get all of those? Whole Foods it's really fairly, I wouldn't say easy, but it's simple.
So what would be a good way to introduce fiber into your diet if I'm just starting to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah, if it's not something you've really been mindful of before, maybe you don't eat a whole lot of whole foods or produce even maybe, you want to start slow. You don't want to just kind of go right for it because those bugs almost have to get used to eating that kind of food again, right? For the time being, I would say just maybe choose a meal or 2 in a week, but maybe just 1 meal, breakfast, and think I'm going to add fruit to my breakfast every morning. It can be as simple as that. And your gut microbiome changes, it's about 7 days. It can totally kind of roll over. So you're going to see these benefits fairly quickly, which is really encouraging. But yeah, just starting like maybe breakfast, you're adding your berries to, or maybe dinner, you're having a side salad. Maybe that's not something you were doing before, but maybe you're doing that now. Choose maybe 1 or 2 of those things and just see how you do over the next kind of week or so, and then layer on top of that from there. Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, well, that's going to do it for us today. Thanks for watching. We're going to be back again with another part of this microbiome series, so just stay tuned. We're going to have a lot more information for you.
We'll see you next week.